Hey everyone, welcome to the Wild and Uncut podcast brought to you by Ruger. I'm your host, Kristy Titus. Thank you for tuning in. The line is going hot, so let's go full send on this episode.
Only Republicans can support or only Democrats can support. It's something that really can bring people together.
Can't go where the mind hasn't been. So if we don't train our minds first, then we are tactical.
Even if it's my second Olympics and I win a medal, what do I do with a medal?
If you don't have freedom,
If you don't
have anything.
You have nothing.
Hello, ladies. I lied to you before. We are back a lot sooner than later, and for good reason. We have Beth Walker here.
Beth is an incredible young lady. If you guys have not been following along with her, she's on the Girls with Guns shooting team. She's on Team Ruger. And Beth, you have such an incredible journey into shooting sports and discovery that ties into all the ladies at the Well Armed Woman. I know our audience would just love to hear your story.
So my story is actually kind of interesting how I got involved in the firearms industry. It started out with some really severe concussions. I had some injuries that prohibited me from being able to play other sports when I was very, very young. I was 12 years old. And that just kind of was an avenue for me needing a safer alternative to traditional sports. So I got involved with the shooting community. From there, I've been able to do Second Amendment advocacy, work with the Well Armed Woman, work with Girls with Guns Clothing, Ruger, and a couple other amazing companies.
So, back up. NRA 4 years ago?
It was in Louisville.
4 years ago? Morgan is singing at the Ruger booth, beaten down, like, getting her jam on like she does.
Down, I like that.
Always.
Beaten down, like she does.
Getting the music going. You show up at the booth. Jen and Narissa meet you, and this is how amazing our community is, ladies, of the Well Armed Woman. They meet you, and they like go full mama bear hug.
Oh yeah, it's been an amazing journey, and really, if it weren't for that chance meeting at NRA show, I wouldn't be where I am right now. So it was amazing.
So that chance meeting happened at my show?
Yes, actually, it did. So
I'm taking credit.
That's what I'm trying to say. Like, you were like going full, and she's like, I gotta get me some of this. I'm like,
so
on this group.
It was all because I was involved with a knife company that had a relationship with Jen and Narissa, and they walked me over there, and you were actually there singing, I believe, when I made that introduction. So, yeah.
Amazing.
And now you're on Team Ruger. You're
Yes.
competing. Tell us a little bit about, what you're doing as a competitor.
Yeah, as a competitor, I'm really kind of all over the place. I travel all around the country and shoot 3-gun. I've been doing that for actually 5 years now. My 5-year anniversary was this month of shooting 3-gun.
Happy Annie.
So it's been a great time, but really Ruger and Girls with Guns have been a huge blessing in the shooting sports to me. And Girls with Guns is really the reason that I was introduced to Ruger and had that relationship. So they've been a huge just part of my journey, really honestly there from the beginning, since before I actually started in the competitive shooting sports. So yeah, I mean, I'm just traveling all over the country, shooting with my rifle and pistol and shotgun.
You ladies, I don't know if you can see at home, but she has no pores. She's very young. How young are you, Beth?
I just turned 20 this month.
20.
So yeah, and I've been shooting since I was 15.
We went to dinner last night, and I was like, who would like a drink, Beth? She was like, no. And I was like, okay, you're not 21. I'm sorry I even asked. But are you now the youngest professional shooter on Ruger's team?
I am the youngest professional shooter on Ruger's team. And really, Girls with Guns, I was for a long time. And then I had made an introduction to a very young shooter named Avery. I believe she's 12 now.
Yeah,
so
I met Miss Avery.
Yes,
she's adorable.
And she's on Team Girls with Guns now. So it's been really interesting how, as a young person, I've been able to kind of hopefully and continue to build bridges for these young shooters that are up and coming to be able to be involved with companies like Girls with Guns, Ruger, and other major powers in the industry.
So there's a lot of ladies out there right now that are mothers and grandmothers, and they don't have a Beth Walker to guide and mentor their child into competitive shooting. What advice can you give these ladies that they can take home and apply to their own families?
I would say don't push your kids. There's a lot of people that ask me how they can get their young kids involved and how they can get them interested. And I've seen way too many young kids get burnt out in the industry. They get thrown in, parents push very hard, and then they realize, oh, I didn't love this in the first place. So that's something I would really encourage, is to make sure this is something that your child wants. You know, my parents waited 2 years to get me involved in the shooting sports after initially discovering it, because they wanted to make sure it was something I wanted, not something that they wanted for me.
Yeah.
So, and they've been super, super supportive the whole time, but also just make time to really go over the basics with your child. You know, the four rules of firearm safety, it sounds cliche, but just make sure your kids know those by heart, know what's happening inside the firearm as you're taking these shots. Because I think that background knowledge really almost makes it more exciting for them. You know, there's a little explosion happening in these guns, and talk them through every step of what's happening. And make sure that they truly are knowledgeable about it, because again, I see way too many kids that come into this because their parents have asked them to, their parents have pushed it, and they don't know what's going on, and it's sad for them because they get put in a bad position. So just make sure your kids have the background knowledge that really allows them to thrive, and make sure that they want it.
So for those kids that are there, and they want it, they love shooting, where can they go?
Okay, so this is something that I was very confused about when I first started. We had a 20-match series in our backyard, and we're just searching the wrong words on the internet and couldn't find it. So looking at a website like Practice Score, you can find all kinds of matches, a precision rifle, strictly pistol matches, rimfire, 3-gun, the whole 9 yards. So really, you know, finding matches in your area and taking your child to those matches, maybe not shooting the first one that they go. A lot of these people are super welcoming and will let your kids, you know, borrow their guns and shoot a stage after the match is over, just to kind of get a feel for it. That way you also aren't making an investment in firearms that you aren't going to stick with. You find things you like, you know, buy once, cry once. It's kind of a sad, sad thing to say.
I love that.
But if you buy quality firearms, quality gear from the beginning, it makes your whole journey a lot easier. So going to a competition, making those relationships with current shooters, asking them questions is a huge step up in the game if you start out that way, rather than buying all the stuff and going to a match and then realizing that your gear and your guns don't work for the competition set.
That you have the wrong equipment.
Yeah. And competitive shooters, I would say by most standards, are incredibly welcoming, especially to young people, because this industry is dominated from 30s and up. So having that younger demographic coming into it ensures that their matches that they love will stick around. So I think a huge part of that is just making those relationships with people that are established in the community, whether it's professionally with a company or just somebody that's an avid shooter on their local competition circuit. Having those friendships and gaining information from those people is so important.
Did you grow up around firearms?
Yes, I grew up in a very firearms-friendly home. My dad's law enforcement. Our family has a huge history of being involved in hunting, but funny enough, I've never been hunting, ever.
Oh, that's a whole nother can of worms. We're gonna get there. That's good to know.
But I grew up in a very firearms-friendly home. I believe I shot for the first time when I was 7 or 8, and it was a Ruger Mark III. Was my first gun that I ever shot.
Wow, full circle for you.
Very full circle.
Being sponsored by Ruger now.
Yeah, I've written a couple articles about that it really just, I feel like it's a God thing, you know, that
100%.
I definitely have that full circle journey. But I've shot since I was very young. But before I even took those shots with a .22, my dad did take the time to really walk me through the safety elements, made sure that I could recite the 4 rules of gun safety without any help. That I knew what was going on in the firearm. I think I'd been dry firing for probably 2.5 years before I ever shot a gun. So it was really an educational journey for me, and I feel like now I'm so much more thankful for that because I can have conversations with, these industry powerhouses, and I feel like I know what's going on and I know my gear, my guns, and I'm able to explain why I choose what I choose and things like that. Yeah, I'm more prepared. I'm more educated. And I think that's something that the firearms industry needs is educated people that are willing to share information with others. Because we've hit kind of, I feel like, a plateau as an industry with that, really reaching out to people that aren't familiar with firearms. And now I feel like because of social media, because of groups like the Well-Armed Woman, Girls with Guns Clothing, they're doing great outreach work with people that aren't familiar.
Yeah, so important. And I grew up, my father also was a hunter, never took me hunting. And he just was getting into hunting a few years before I was born. So, it wasn't like he was an expert or traveled around. He just hunted in North Carolina. Yeah. But we had firearms in the home. I was never taught anything firearm related. It wasn't until later in life, actually. My journey with shooting and hunting came way later in life, my early 20s. So like a year or two ago. But
we're pretty much the same age.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 21. But, We wish. Right? Gosh. I actually don't want to be 21 again. As soon as I hit 30, everyone was so scared. They're like, oh, you're going to have like a meltdown when you hit your 30s. I loved hitting 30 because I was like, the pressure's kind of off. Like my mom's like, well, she's not married yet, whatever. I'm not going to bother anymore. She doesn't have kids yet. I'm not going to bother anymore. Just these, I could do my own thing and I could like less societal pressures kind of, but I've also heard hitting 40 is even better. And I've heard from people hitting 50 is even better. So
much to look forward to.
So much to look forward to. But going back to firearms in the home at a young age, I've got friends, I don't have kids myself, but I have friends, and I know this is a personal preference, and it's not like a rule book that I know of about, when to teach your children about firearms. But I've got friends that they say, I'm not going to have them in my house. I want to take the curiosity away.
Yeah.
We hear all these awful stories, awful headlines of, just recently, a child shooting, his mom while she's on a Zoom call in the back of the head by accident, right?
Yeah.
I've heard the theory of, well, if you take the curiosity away from a very young age, explaining, maybe not necessarily shooting with them at a young age, below 5, and that's up to you. I always like to hear from people when they're teaching their kids about firearms safety, showing their children where the firearms are in the home. What was your personal experience with all of that growing up?
So I was told where my father's firearms were. I knew that from a very, very young age because from what my parents have said, I was a very curious kid. But I always talk about it like we teach our kids not to walk in the kitchen and pick up the kitchen knives because there is an inherent danger to them unless you know how to use them and unless you know how to use them properly. So introduce it to them like you would a kitchen knife. You don't touch it unless you have direct permission. You're in a safe environment. You have supervision, things like that. And then really for me, once my dad started talking me through the background of it, I was less curious. And
what age was that?
I would say I was probably 5 when we started going over the actual safety elements of it, but I think I was aware of the firearms before then, just because it was very normal for my dad to concealed carry. My mom grew up in rural Montana, strong hunting family. So, I mean, it wasn't ever like a taboo subject in our home. But another thing I like to tell people is, if you personally don't want to have firearms in your home, your kids still need to be aware because they may go to someone else's house and encounter a firearm or something that seems out of place.
Whoa, that's like, so I never even thought about that. That's mind-blowing.
You never know what a kid's going to do with that.
Or
kids,
if they have friends, they go to a
Right.
friend's house and they're educated on safe handling of firearms, and maybe the friend hasn't had that same background, and the kid can actually step in and be like, "Whoa, we gotta not
step
do
back.
this.
This is off.
Exactly,
off limits.
and that's so important.
Yeah, because you never know what a kid's gonna do. They grab things and throw them in backpacks. They, bring their backpack home, and what if, they bring a firearm into the home with a family that isn't comfortable with it, or something like that. So always making sure that you have that background knowledge and that your kid knows, if you see something that looks out of place to you or that you're not comfortable with, doesn't mean that you grab it and you play with it. Talk to an adult and go from there. But I mean, kids run around with Nerf guns and BB guns and things like that all the time, but there is still an inherent sense of safety that they need to understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because my little cousins, they're 6 and 7, run around with Nerf guns all the time, but they're finger off the trigger because we've taught them with regular firearms that that's something that's important.
Yeah.
So it's something almost that they kind of joke about now, because they'll look at me and they'll just be like this. But that's how I started driving too.
Yeah.
When I first learned how to drive, I was so used to that finger off the trigger that I kept my hands like this on the steering wheel. I don't know that if it was just second nature to me or something. 'Cause I've been shooting.
Yeah.
I didn't get my license till I was 18.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a little old. I don't know why I waited that long, but
Because you were being chauffeured around. It was nice.
I was handling guns for 3 years before that, almost constantly. I mean,
They're both-
hours a day.
I mean, I think there's inherently there's a lot of danger in driving a vehicle. So,
Yes.
being responsible about it, there's nothing wrong with that.
My dad always made fun of me. He took pictures of me. He's like, she's got trigger discipline even when she's driving a car, which doesn't really make sense, but must just be second nature.
So as young as you are, you're also a Second Amendment advocate for other young people. So tell everybody a little bit about what you're doing on the advocacy side.
So I've been involved with the DC Project Women for Gun Rights for 4.5 years now, and I'm the Indiana State Director and also the social media director for that organization.
Good for you.
Are you friends with Janet Holcomb?
I know her.
Okay, I gotta hook you up with her.
Yeah,
She's amazing.
I believe I've met her once or twice, but never been to the range with her or anything. I got invited to an event last week with her, but I just was...
She had a new range opening.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was just too busy to get to it, but I'd love to go out. I absolutely...
Janet is the Governor Eric Holcomb, his wife.
Yes.
She helped put together NRA shooting sports at Camp Atterbury in Indiana. So she really took the initiative to put their shooting facility on the map for NRA sports and competition.
Yeah.
So
From what I've heard, she's been an amazing advocate
Love
for the
her.
Second Amendment. But
I took her elk hunting a couple years ago.
oh, that's awesome.
She's pretty awesome, righteous. She's good with a gun.
Yeah.
Nice.
So sorry, I didn't.
Oh no,
interrupt you.
you're good. But the DC Project has really been my avenue for the introduction into the advocacy world. And because of that, I've been involved with other political groups, Turning Point USA, Young Americans for Liberty. I've done a couple campus speeches during COVID, so it was all virtual, but a couple campus speeches for Turning Point about the Second Amendment. And really my mission is just to educate other young people, because we are going to be a huge voting body over the next decade. And so teaching them that, your Second Amendment rights really are on the line right now is huge. My generation is insanely aggressive in the advocacy world, for better or for worse. Because of social media, I think that's been a huge thing.
Yeah, it's almost like they have to anchor a flag and pick a team.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's no in-betweens. And so what I want to do is I want to come on these platforms and be an educational force. So maybe somebody that has been adamantly anti-gun their entire life will run across my page and see a positive image of the shooting sports. And I think that's something that we really need to be adamant about as an industry.
The optic that we're putting out there.
Yes, and knowing that everywhere you go, you're a representation of the firearms community, of the 2A community, and never give somebody a bad taste in their mouth, because it's so easy to do. One irresponsible action can create a whole chain effect of bad things for the entire industry. So really being a positive role model and an educational force, I think, is what I've sought to do with my platform. But social media has been a huge part of it, and there's been a lot of people that I've reached, even in other countries, hearing about some of the things that have happened in Europe with their gun rights and their ability to have firearms in their homes has been very eye-opening for me, because it can happen in a matter of weeks and months.
Yeah.
So
my husband's European. I can tell you
Yes.
all about this.
yeah, knowing that
On
we
a whole another
Yeah.
segment about that,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Oh yeah, knowing that we really are, I mean, we're on the brink of something like that happening, and for my generation especially, because of the ability we have with social media to reach people, I think that really is an underused way of communication.
Going back to kids or young adults even, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that you're having to assert yourself or educate around? And then what are the talking points you're giving those individuals to kind of set the record straight?
Yeah, I think a huge one is that the firearms community isn't inclusive. That's been a huge...
Inclusive meaning gender diversity?
Racial diversity.
Okay.
I mean, just truly everything, you know. The Second Amendment isn't partisan.
Absolutely not.
It's a constitutional matter, and that's all it is. It's not something that only Republicans can support or only Democrats can support. It's something that really can bring people together. And I mean, the DC Project has been an incredible example of this to me, because we have women of literally every political party, sexuality, occupation, race. We have, I mean, literally, we cover the entire spectrum. And if that's not inclusivity, I don't know what is. And the Second Amendment really can foster that, because it's a bridge that can be built among all different walks of life. And another one is that, you know, firearms owners don't want to associate with people that aren't pro-gun. So necessarily in this kind of society that we're living in, I think there's a very negative view of firearms owners because of the media and what we are portrayed as. But, you know, building bridges is so important, and reaching out to people that aren't sure about firearms, aren't sure about how to use them is, I think, a huge way that we can solidify that we are an inclusive community. Because some people aren't as blessed as I have been with the family and the community that I've been involved in. I grew up obviously very pro-gun, in a very pro-gun community. Rural Indiana, I mean, you can't get more pro-gun than that. So I've grown up in a great community, but some people don't have that. And being that bridge and showing them that, you know, however you vote is fine. I don't care. However you, who you date doesn't matter, whatever. But our common ground is that we support the Second Amendment, and we're going to do everything we have to defend that right to defend ourselves.
Yeah.
I feel like there's so much social division
Yes.
in young people right now. It's very difficult to find that commonality. And I think a lot of that, there's not so much social division happening, it's almost created.
Yes.
Because if you ask a lot of young adults, they're like, well, I don't feel like that.
Yeah.
It's like, well, then who's feeding this, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Where is this coming from?
Yeah.
But you're right. The Second Amendment is something that can divide everybody, because everybody has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
And with that right to life, we have the right to defend our
Yeah.
life. And that is a human right, and it's unalienable to everyone.
Yep.
That's right. Speaking of bridging the gap, you know, there's a lot of our members that are on social media and active on social media, but also they have kids, grandkids, nieces and nephews that are Beth's age, even younger than that. I just want to encourage you to encourage them they are on social media anyways, most of them, to follow some of these resources, some that I know. She mentioned Turning Point USA, which Kristy also works with. They are such
Trigger
a great
University.
Yes,
They're great.
Trigger is amazing.
Trigger students for 2A, who DC Project. Follow their social media. Who else, ladies?
Oh man, I feel like there's a lot.
Those are the main ones that I'm currently like active or surrounding myself
Same
around.
here.
A lot of information, and Turning Point USA is doing really great things. They've got their own app now. They've got over-the-top television shows, which is digital shows.
And they've just brought in a young woman,
Paige is her name. Paige Rue, I believe.
And she's doing some digital content for them from a young woman's perspective.
All surrounding the 2A. All of her content is going to be about concealed carry, firearms training, legislative action, and so it's going to be very, very good in an educational database that can be used for a lot of young people.
But finding those resources that's appealing to a younger demographic that's consumptive in a level that they're going to relate to is really important. And you're creating a lot of online content. Now, I am always blown away at some of your social media posts because I'm like, wow, this girl is wise beyond your years.
Even how you speak right now, you're so eloquent. I was like, I don't know if I was speaking and it was knowledgeable like you at 20. I mean, I'm so proud to be your friend, that you're able to just speak on behalf of the firearms community the way you do. It's really impressive.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's definitely been a learning curve for me. I used to be scared to death to talk on camera. I used to be very, very shy. But I think another thing that this community is really good at is bringing out the best in people and being involved with, I mean, just Girls with Guns for one, if focusing on that, they have brought out a lot of confidence in me that I didn't know I had. And, you know, having that female voice in the firearms industry is something that was lacking for a long time. But I think
a young female voice too, and for your generation.
And I think that's something that maybe is really going to bring more people into the industry and into the community over the next few years. Hopefully over the next many years. But I mean, all we can do is educate more young people and hope that they grow up and hopefully get involved with people as incredible as the ones I've gotten involved with.
So all of these ladies watching, they're chapter leaders. They're leaders. They want to organize and implement. Do you have any specific advice for them how they can organize or implement programs within their chapters that might be appealing to younger audiences?
Great question.
So I talk about this a lot, but social media is huge among my generation. We live in a very viral culture. Gen Z is a very viral generation, viral oriented. We love easily consumable content because we have very short attention spans. And from somebody, I work in political marketing and do a lot with content creation in my professional life. That's my normal day job, I guess. But using social media as a tool for reaching young people is going to be a big game changer in the next decade, because social media is only growing. There's so many different platforms that can be utilized, but Instagram and Twitter are great platforms to use to reach young people. TikTok, but I'm not a big TikTok fan.
I don't.
But I would say definitely use social media to your advantage.
So a lot of ladies don't know how to use social media to their advantage. This is a very broad spectrum. They're like, well, I posted a picture this week. That's not what we're talking about here, ladies.
Give these ladies specifics, right?
You know, I mean, maybe they, find a young person that is on to what social media means. Because it isn't about, I post a picture once a week, my chapter's being visible. It's literally like a machine that has to be oiled.
Yes,
constantly.
I agree. And utilizing those young people in your community that do understand the viral culture, but also support the same things that we support is so great. But also, I think that there's a gap maybe with some of the women that don't know how to use social media to some of the young people. You have to come together on it, and the young people have to listen to the wisdom of the older people in the community. And the older people in the community have to really be understanding that there is a totally different virality to the culture right now. And as sad as it is, that's the only way that you're going to reach my generation.
And the two generations right now aren't talking well together.
Right, and that's a huge part of the division, the
problem.
division that's happening, because there's so much wisdom to be gained from the older generation in the community. But there's also expertise that some of these younger people have in the intricacies of social media and what our culture and our younger generation likes to consume. That I think if we could come together, there would be a huge shift in the amount of people coming into the community.
In my head, I have come together right now.
I would do
like
that,
it.
but it won't sound like
No,
that.
me either.
It's playing in my head. It's playing in my head, and we need to do
How can
it.
everybody find you, follow you? I mean, you're such an inspirational young woman. If people have questions, slip it into her DM.
Yes.
If you don't know what
Slip
that
it into her
means,
DM. Slide up in the DM.
Slide into
slip,
the DMs. It's slide.
Slip,
but
slips and slide.
It's okay.
Slip and slide.
It's similar.
Slip and
slide
slide.
in a DM. If you don't know what a DM, it's a direct message on
Yes.
social media.
Yes.
Slip and slide. I'm old. Okay, leave me alone.
Slip into the DMs.
Slip it into the DM.
Oh, gosh.
This works, okay? But you can direct message
Yes.
you on social media. How can people slip into your DM?
That just showed you the gap right there that we're
That's
talking
scary.
about, the generational gap. The
But
kids
yeah,
say
I
slide
could
into
be your
DMs.
mom, okay? Literally.
Oh man.
I'm like mother-daughter talking here.
That's
it's all good.
so funny. But 3 Gun Beth is my handle on every platform. And yes, definitely direct message me for information and education.
Outstanding.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for joining
you guys
us.
for
Thank
having
you for
me.
supporting the Well-Armed Woman. Thank you for reaching out to the amazing women in our chapters. We applaud you for being here and appreciate you beyond words.
Thank you, and thank you all for tuning in.
Welcome back, ladies. We have Gabby Franco here with us. We are so grateful to have you here, Gabby, as always. And I want to mention before we get started on our Q&A, we are taking your questions. Whatever questions you have for Gabby, you can just get on the app, get on the platform, and I've got them right here so we can ask her directly. So,
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. I think for a lot of us ladies, some of the kind of takeaway notes of the Well-Armed Woman, relating specifically to them is that we are powerful, our voice matters, and we can make a difference. And you have so much of a story behind everything that you do, and it's so inspirational. I think everybody really probably at home watching, and then I know myself personally, can really just feel like, wow, I feel more powerful because Gabby says I am. Like, this is amazing.
But I think the amazing thing is that sometimes most of the time we underestimate ourselves and our impacts to others, not only on the Second Amendment, but in other aspects in life. That, we look eye to eye to people. I look at you, and, we don't see what is behind it. What is behind, there's happiness, there's joy, there's success, but there's also failure, there's fear, there's concerns. And that little word of encouragement, that little word of, we need to stick together, especially when it comes to the Second Amendment, that your concerns, your fears, you're not alone. And it may be repetitive, may be something that people may think, they are probably tired of hearing this, but that may be what that person needs to hear to bump up that energy and say, you know what, I'm also part of it, and I want to be part of it. I want to be that voice too. And at the end of the day, we are in this together. We cannot expect that the person who has some sort of popularity is the only one who speaks up. We talk to our friends, our families, and that's so important.
especially coming from where you come from, your background, the government, you understand more than so many people the importance of being able, having the freedoms to even have a voice.
And, something that's amazing is that it's something I think is human behavior, that we sometimes don't listen to those who tells us, watch out. Like you see the children, the parent says, don't do that, because if you do that, you don't have that experience, and sometimes we don't listen. And it takes effort, even for me, that I say so many things and you get dismissed. Because they say it's not going to happen here. This is a different country. And so sometimes it's discouraging because you're like, are they listening? And especially like you're saying, coming from Venezuela, where many people said the same thing. It's never going to happen here. We are the richest country in the area. Venezuela, that's what it was. We have the largest oil reserves in the world. I mean, technically we're a very rich country, and yet it's so easy to slip and go down. So going to what you're saying is that you just need to keep speaking up. Because if my coach, if he would have been discouraged, he was Cuban, he wouldn't have kept saying what he said, I probably wouldn't be here. You know, and I think that's so important. And I don't think, I had a plan B, the United States. I don't think there's plan B after this. There's no plan C.
There is nowhere else to go.
I don't think so. With the opportunities that this country offers, the opportunities not only for success, it's just, I've been rock bottom. And I want to say by myself, because gladly I have people, friends that encouraged me, but it's the opportunities that you have here that we can just walk up and get out of that situation. You don't see that everywhere around the world.
No, especially now we're publicly seeing that what's happening in Afghanistan. Just these people who are fighting to get out because they have no voice.
Nothing.
They have nothing. They're scared for their lives, and they've had no voice whatsoever. And I just think it's unfathomable to somebody who's born and raised here and who's always had a voice. It's so easy to take for granted, but when we see what's happening on the news, it's a quick reality check.
It is.
Of how important it is to have a firearm.
Yes.
And the freedom that we have to be able to train with our firearm is something that most people don't have. And we are very blessed for that. And even if people do have the ability, it's not always common. Like in your situation, coming from Venezuela, one of the questions we had is, how did you get into shooting? Because it's not common for women to be participating in shooting sports in South America. So how did you bridge that gap to I'm going to be the lady to change the world?
Yeah, it's very interesting because what people know nowadays about Venezuela, that's not what Venezuela was back when I was a young girl. People were able to own firearms. People were able to conceal and carry, go and get their concealed carry license. There was such a thing as a concealed carry license in Venezuela. And my dad, he came from a family where hunters and farms, so he took us to the gun range, and that's how we started it. And that was pretty much my dad's. We were 3 girls, so I guess, no boys at that time, so he will take us to do those kind of activities. And it was great because the opportunity was there. You see, the opportunity was there. The problem is that now this opportunity doesn't exist for no other women, no other girls. And that's a problem. When we start narrowing it down things, you are chopping the opportunities for people to explore, to live life to the fullest, and to learn, like what we just talked, having the opportunity to learn, to be better. Whether you like it, you are in it or not. Like, to give an example, my mother, you would think that my mom shoots and all that. She did not. She was not interested in firearms. Yet, she supported us.
Yeah.
She supported my dad for her his guns, having a gun for carry, for protect us and
Keeping
everything.
it in the house. And,
to my sisters and I, she was our best cheerleader. It was not her thing, perfect. But her mindset, she had an open mind to let us do what we wanted to do and support us doing it. I wouldn't probably be in the Olympic Games. I wouldn't have gone to the Olympic Games if it weren't for her willingness to overpass probably her fears, her concerns, or her lack of knowledge.
She sounds like she's an amazing woman.
She's my mama.
And speaking of family, we have a question. What was your life like when you left your family and you came here to the U.S.?
It was challenging. I left Venezuela about 4 years after Hugo Chavez took power, the socialist. And, as a young person, I didn't want to leave my country. I left my country. However, as years passed, they changed the Constitution. He had already changed the Constitution. He made so many different steps that there was not going to be a way back. And so I did, through the voice or through the knowledge of my coach, who's Cuban, I understood that this was not going to get better. There were a lot of riots against the government generally, because they were obviously taking a lot of things from the people. And mind that we didn't have a Second Amendment rights. We don't have like the First Amendment rights. You see what I mean? We have it in a general universal rights, but you know what I mean? It's not like so ingrained like it's supposed to be. So it was easy to slip, from the government. And also another thing I always say is that the government have this idea they say, let's do this for the common good. This is let's engage in this activity for the common good.
That sounds very familiar.
Let's make the government bigger for the common good. And that's basically what they did. So obviously coming here, I didn't see a future for me or how I envisioned since I was a little girl. And I left everything behind. I had already finished my last competition in Brazil. I had won 3 gold medals. I was Olympic hope for Athens 2004. And I just did a calculated risk, and I say, even if it's my second Olympics and I win a medal, let's say I win a medal, what do I do with a medal?
If you don't have freedom, you don't have anything.
You have nothing.
That was something very profound that you said, and if you don't have freedom, you don't have anything. And right now, we are truly in a fight for freedom. And as we lose these small tastes of liberty and the ability to have personal responsibility, and that's one thing that all of us ladies at the Wild Uncut Woman don't take lightly. With freedom comes responsibility. Yeah. With gun ownership comes responsibility, and that's why all of us are so involved with education and training and outreach. Is there some major takeaways that you have for ladies where help them in their communities? What are some grassroots activism efforts that they can do to either just get to the gun range more or become a stronger supporter or proponent or voice for the Second Amendment? There's a lot of ladies that don't want to be, maybe necessarily like me and Morgan and out forward facing, but there's a lot that it can be done.
Yes. So one of the things I always say is don't close the door for those people who don't believe what you believe. Breach that gap, reduce that gap. Be willing to have the conversations. Even those people who are completely against guns, let's sit down. And even if we don't come to a complete agreement, at least ask questions. Leave them with a question mark. They can go back home and think about that. Yeah. And that's how we change people, not by us imposing, but making them analyze and think about the possibilities. Like, what would be the possibility that you are in your home by yourself, and an intruder is going to go in your house? How are you going to protect yourself, your child, your family? At the same time, besides talking to people like that, you can also be involved in organizations like the DC Project and other political organizations that can help you, or you can help them reach out more people.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Gabby, for sitting down with us and speaking to our members, but also everything that you do in our community, and for using your voice and your platform in such a way to help us all. We are so appreciative.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, we can't thank you enough. Thank you.
Stay tuned. We will be back here shortly.
Hey everybody, our next speaker is an incredible woman, Nikki Burgett, and she is a certified law enforcement instructor that specializes and teaches several courses for the State Department's Anti-Terrorism Assistance Program. This lady knows what she's talking about. She has traveled extensively working with Kurdish security forces in Iraq, training spear teams, teaching anti-terrorism courses in the Philippines. She's been all over the world. She's got advanced homeland security training, and she's truly a knowledgeable person that comes from a place of experience to really help others prevent and mitigate acts of violence. So Oh my gosh, you guys get ready for a deep dive into life-changing information from Nikki. This woman literally is the epitome of can do it all and is a badass. Like, unbelievable. I was blown away by your PowerPoint and how enlightening everything was, because I think a lot of us have experienced different body response stressors from going from white to black. And I mean, you're like, I get what's happening in this situation, and the way you colorized it, and it was incredible.
So it's Cooper's color code, which a lot of people are familiar with, but they don't really focus on how that impacts them. And the example that I use is just how difficult it is to even dial 911 when you're under stress. And I work in law enforcement, but I've experienced that before, where I'm like, why won't my phone work? Well, it's operator error. And then it's under stress, even the small things, like you cannot make your body react. And someone else gave me an example of, they were using cold ice water, and they were, it's like so much time in the ice water, and then they had to pull the hands out and try to load their weapon and fire. It's like that. If you're under stress and you have to do something small and minute, dialing 911, loading your weapon, it just becomes incredibly difficult. So this is where muscle memory comes in. And then the more you do it, the more your body will just react. And even if your mind's in black, or you think you're in black, then your body's just, we're going, because we've already practiced this and we know what you're doing, it's okay.
Yeah. I've been in a situation where I had someone try to break in my house, and my hand went directly for my firearm, finger off the trigger, pointing in a safe direction because I had been practicing. But when I called 911 and they asked me for my name, the first thing you learn as a baby, my name, I couldn't remember my name. I said, Brittany, which is my middle name. I said, okay, I get it. It's real. It's a real thing.
There was a story that somebody had told me, where a guy was he was confronted by a gang member who had pulled a weapon on him, and he said that he was going to pull his weapon, but somebody from behind him had actually shot him and put him down, and he was shocked. He was like, wow, I didn't even have to fire, and there was no one behind him, and his gun was in his hand. So without even thinking, because he had done this so many times, he drew his weapon and put him down, and he thought someone else had done it.
Wow, that is incredible. And it goes back to, you don't rise up to the occasion, you fall back to your level of training.
Lowest level of training, yes. And that's hard for us. But the body can't go where the mind hasn't been. So if we don't train our minds first, then we are tactical. We have a lot of really cool stuff.
I'm going to pause you there because someone just asked, can you give specific mental training exercises?
Yes, so playing the what if game is a big one. It's anytime you walk into a new location, you go, okay, so if something was to happen right now, what is my primary exit? What's my secondary exit? What exit could I force if I had to? A window. What am I going to use to break it? You do this all the time, and it comes down to, it doesn't take a whole lot of time, 30 seconds to a minute, and you're like, okay, I'm done. I feel good about what my options are. When something happens, because we don't say if. When something happens, this is what I'm going to do. And I know we call it the what if game, but I guess we could call the what win game.
What win game.
The what win game. But it's what we're doing, and you have to have a plan. And there's two things that you have to think about. One, what am I mentally willing to do? And what am I physically capable of doing? And when you start doing your what if, okay, so I'm on the third floor. I'm going to break the window. What am I going to use? Do I know if the glass has the safety film on it? Am I willing to jump out of a third story floor window? People have survived from that kind of height. They've actually survived from higher, but can you make yourself jump? And that's a big thing. And if you're not there, then you need a different plan. So Sun Tzu says, know yourself, know your enemy. Knowing your enemy gives you good offense. Knowing yourself gives you good defense. So in this presentation, really what they're focused on is what am I? Who am I? What am I willing to do to survive? And there are three things that I want everyone to remember. One is move. Two is breathe. Three is survive. and that survival is up to you. That plan of survival is yours, and I can't tell you what that is. I can't tell you how to formulate it because I don't know who you are, and every situation is different, and that's really what training your mind is about, and just going through the what if this happens and having agile plans, because you can't plan for every situation. You just have to know this is what I'm going to do, and then go with it.
We're going to go a little bit over on this session, but response to threat. In your PowerPoint, you talked about a lot of women second guessing, or people second guessing what they hear. Oh, it wasn't a gunshot, it was a car backfiring. And then seeing, not necessarily believing, and freezing before the fight or flight kicks in.
Yes.
Walk us through that a little bit and how we can possibly mentally become more responsive to getting through this process.
Okay, so the first part is you need to make sure that you do say when. And by saying when, that helps you overcome that. When you hear something, your first response is to put it in a benign box, because that's what we do. We compartmentalize things. We hear a sound, and we're in a situation where we're not on the range. So why would that be firearms? I mean, I know what firearms sound like, but I'm not in a situation where I should be hearing it. So we're going to go ahead and just automatically stick it in this box. That means it's somebody dropped something heavy, somebody slammed a door. I'm not concerned about it. And you need to really question it. It's a loud noise. Okay, so what is it? And really let your body is going to tell you there's something wrong. Pay attention to it. When you're when you're inside, the acoustics make that the rounds sound very different. So even if you recognize that it's firearms and that it's a shotgun, or sorry,
any sort of firearm.
Yeah, any sort of
firearm.
That you may not know immediately the direction that it's coming from, so that is also important to think about. If you can do any type of live fire training, like at a shoot house, or where they do blanks inside of a building. I've been to a lot of active shooter events where they'll do that. Those are things that you can do, because it really makes you understand, hey, this is, wow, it sounds really different. The seeing what you're believing is when you see things and you're like, well, that can't be, that's not what I think it is. It cannot be what I think it is. And part of that is because we will say, well, if something ever happens, or stuff like that never happens to me. You may have friends that say that. I still do, and I try to convince them otherwise. But it's all about changing that mindset. So we don't say if, we say when. We don't second guess that those hairs on the back of your neck, or that feeling in the pit of your stomach. Your body is telling you something. Pay attention, and it doesn't matter if you're wrong. It is okay to be wrong. It doesn't mean you're paranoid. It just means that you're prepared
and aware.
And aware.
Yes, and aware is absolutely important. But the freeze part is, that's our go-to as humans. That it's because we can't overcome. It's because we can't believe what we heard. We don't believe what we see, and then we're at a point where we realize, our body realizes that oh crap moment.
We're in shock.
Yes. Then we're like, what do I do? What do I do? So the first response should never be to freeze. Flee should be the first one, but that's not always going to be an option. And I'm not here to tell you make fight your first response, but you may be in a position where that is the only thing that you can do. So you need to be prepared for, what are my options, which is why you've already identified several exits and weapons of opportunity. You may not have your weapon on you. And because of the work I do, I often don't have one. So you look for whatever it's going to take. And if that's your thumb in their eye, you're going all the way through it. So you do whatever it takes to survive, but it's just up to you as an individual to decide what that is.
I'm going to try to squeeze in one more question. I know we're running behind. We just don't have enough time for you. I wish we had way more time, but many of our ladies are in their later 70s, and they fear they're not strong enough to react to a physical encounter. What can they do to build confidence besides becoming mentally prepared?
So intent. There's a couple of books that I highly recommend. One is The Gift of Fear. The second one is When Violence is the Answer. And it's a wealth of information. I don't know either of these wonderful authors, but I will tell you, I shamelessly promote them because their content is that good. The intent of the threat is to bring you harm, whether to end your life, to rob you, whatever it is, but they know exactly what it is that they're willing to do that. I want you to understand who you are as a person and know what you're willing to do to survive, and and go all in. And no matter what your age is, or their size versus your size, there are things that you can do to them that will put them down. So eyes, throat, groin, those are the three. And I work in law enforcement, and I'm a lot smaller than most people that I arrest. So it's, what am I willing to do, and what can I do? But your intent has to be above theirs. Your intent to survive has to be greater than their intent to do you harm.
As we wrap up, where can these ladies find more of, how can they connect with you? Your website, your courses?
So I have online courses, and they can go to my website, which is nikkiburgett.com, and go to the training tab, and that gives you access to the online courses. And if they sign up for the active threat course today, then they get preventing violent attacks for free. So I'll just get a notification when they're ready to take the second course, because each one of them has a certain amount of time that they have access to it. All they have to do is shoot me an email and say, I'm ready to take that second course, and I will get them enrolled.
Awesome.
That is exciting that you guys can continue this virtual conversation with Nikki and continue to further your education and helping us be aware and safe. And we really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for being here.
No problem. They can email me directly. They can also text me. I tend not to answer my phone because I really don't want that extended warranty on my car. Yeah. But if they have any questions, they feel free to contact me directly. I will always respond.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I know the ladies are very thankful.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. We will be back. And you are you still in Tennessee? You're in Tennessee right now?
Not right now. Right now I am in the beautiful state of Montana, but yes, I am from Tennessee. I'm visiting Montana.
Lucky, lucky. I love Montana.
Well, Miss Morgan is from Tennessee, so thank you so much for what you have done to transform state laws in the state of Tennessee. Now, you were really instrumental into transforming restaurant carry. Can you tell our viewers a little bit more about what kind of advocacy work it took to make those legislative changes, and maybe some of the advice you can give our well-armed women chapter leaders can help us change other legislation in states around the country?
Sure. Well, I don't know that I can take a lot of credit. I'm just a regular person, and something really horrible happened in my life to Ben and I, and it made me decide to get involved. Obviously I believed in our Second Amendment rights. Obviously I had my handgun carry permit, but did I ever get involved politically? Did I ever go out and advocate? No. I just never thought about it until this happened, and it's unfortunate that it took that for me to get involved. I feel like now I wish I had gotten involved before. But I mainly just stood up and said, you know what, something has to change. So I started going to meetings with grassroots organizations, the Tennessee Firearms Association. I went to their meetings, and I just started doing media, talking to the news, talking to people, letting them know that, hey, I'm a victim of this horrible crime, and I don't want more gun control. Gun control actually put us in this situation where we were absolutely defenseless, and the bad guy who violated all of these gun control laws, he didn't even get charged with any of those gun control law violations. It's ridiculous. We have these laws on the books, but then they don't go and prosecute these people for that. I guarantee you, if I had carried illegally that night.
Yeah, that's what's upsetting is so many people say we need more laws, when it's really, actually, we just need to enforce the ones we have more.
What type of difference it is in sentencing would it have made do you know if it would have made a difference from his second degree murder conviction versus if they had done first degree plus all the other firearms laws? If they would have actually truly followed the letter of the law, what would that conviction time and jail time look like in a in a larger.
Well, they actually did prosecute him for first degree, but the judge dropped it to only second degree. Obviously, first degree, well, in Tennessee, it's 51 years mandatory. You have to serve 51 years before you're even eligible for parole. So it's pretty much life in prison. But, for a victim, every single year that he remains locked up is another year that I can live my life without having to worry that he's there, without having to look over my shoulder constantly. And that matters to victims. Yeah. Even if it's just 5 more years tacked on to the end of, whatever he got, that matters to victims. It's like I'm currently fighting for an additional 5 years because he's been stalking me from prison by sending these twisted love letters. And some people, I'm sure, are like, why are you fighting so hard? I mean, I've been at this for well over a year. I've now gone to the media again. And it's the reason that this was taken seriously, I believe, because the media brought attention to it. But yeah, I'm fighting for every single year I can keep him locked up. Because it's terrifying, not only for myself, but I don't want him to get out and harm some other person and destroy some other family. I think he's extremely dangerous. And I guess my main point that I've tried to educate people as best I can is you as a law-abiding person should be able to protect yourself and your loved ones wherever you are. Because evil, unfortunately, can visit you anywhere. And I don't want people to be paranoid, but I do want them to be prepared. Because I learned that evil can show up right in the middle of a busy restaurant.
Now, you had mentioned in your video that you knew this man was stalking you, and you had told staff to remove him because you were afraid. There's some of the questions from the viewers at home are asking did you know your stalker before? And in your opinion, are stalkers usually an acquaintance or some sort of stranger to their victims?
Stalkers are usually an acquaintance. Of course, there are strangers stalkers out there, but by and large, they tend to be acquaintances. And this man he was a karaoke customer. Ben and I ran a mobile karaoke business as a side job. And yeah, this guy was a karaoke customer. He would come in to sing, and he started to kind of become a regular, customer somewhat. He would come in and sing a lot. And I didn't really know him. He seemed, when you work in the tourism industry in Nashville, Tennessee, which karaoke is, you're working in different venues around downtown, and you meet so many tourists, and there's just so many different types of people, and they're your customer. There are nice people, mean people, happy people, sad people. People are going through different things in their lives, and they're your customer, and you're nice to them. And I was nice to him. And he became very strange. He seemed a little bit socially stunted, kind of awkward, a little bit weird. But, so were other customers of mine. I was nice to them. And I think most of us are like that. They're your customer, you're respectful, and you're nice to them.
We've got some more questions.
Lots of questions, so I'm trying to read them. There's some ladies that really just want to reach out and say thank you for being so brave in sharing your story. I think there's a lot of people that can relate to what you're experiencing, or maybe not in the same capacity, but in a similar way. But also, it gives us something to really think about and pay attention to. Looking back at the situation, is there anything that you could, maybe advice to give ladies other than just situational awareness that might help them in a situation like this?
I really think situational awareness is key. We can all go to firearms training classes, and we can learn about the laws and shoot, don't shoot scenarios, and you can go train, and that's great, and you should absolutely go train. But situational awareness is something that you kind of, I guess, have to develop over time. But I'll just tell you this, my firearms trainer, he's since passed away, but his name was Buford Toon, and he was a former Metro police officer in Nashville. And he scared the crap out of me. I'll just say it. Like, when he first trained me, he would show us, his students, these really scary videos of really horrible things that would happen to people. And he would talk about situational awareness and how this situation could have been different, how you should react, how you should think, how, pay attention to your surroundings, know the difference between cover and concealment. And he really made you think about the situation and, are you in a dark parking lot? What should you do? What should you not do? And it really changed my thinking. I think he probably helped save my life the night that Ben was murdered. I do have some survivor guilt. That's gotten better over the years, but there were a number of years that I felt very guilty that I lived. But for whatever reason, my training kicked in and I knew that something was wrong. I knew this guy could be trouble. I didn't know how much trouble. Obviously, I didn't know that he had a gun on him. Obviously, I didn't know that he was capable of murdering someone in front of 50 people in the middle of a busy restaurant. But my gut told me something is incredibly wrong. You need to get away from him. You need to go get management and have him removed. And I stood beside a brick wall, maybe 30 feet away, and something told me, don't let him see you. Because he had no idea where I had gone. And I could kind of see him, but he had no idea where I was. And I think that decision probably saved my life, because it would have been very easy for him to either kidnap me or kill me, or who knows what he would have done with me. I don't know for sure.
So this type of training that you experienced, that happened prior to your husband being murdered, because you had just a bad feeling. And I think this just really reiterates a lot of what we're learning in any situation, is if you have a gut feeling, to really trust that. And you trusted your instincts. And you did get training, and it's an absolute, I can't even fathom what you have gone through as a wife, as a woman. In my heart, it breaks for you. And I'm so thankful that you are brave enough and strong enough to come out here and face the world and empower so many women and help us learn from your voice and your experience.
Thank you. I really want people to know that not all victims of violent crime are against guns, and unfortunately the media does not share stories like mine very often. I've had to work really hard to get my situation out there to help educate people, because so many times over and over again we see on the mainstream media where survivors of what they call it gun violence, they go on and join Moms Demand Action, and they don't like gun ownership. Some of them want to ban guns. Some of them just want, strict, really, really restrictive gun control that really only is going to affect law-abiding people. It's not going to affect the bad guys. But I think it's important that victims get out there and say, hey, you know what? I want to be able to carry a gun. And here's why.
Someone wants to know, do you travel and speak? They would love to have you as a guest speaker in October, which is Violent Crime Awareness Month at their chapter.
Yes, I do travel. Yeah. If I know ahead of time and, I'm able to get it scheduled, sure.
How can the Twisters connect with you on social media, plug your website in whatever way you would like to be connected with?
Sure. If you want to plug my website, that would be great. It's stalkedanddefenseless.com. And as far as my social media, I pretty much keep it on lockdown. I only really add people that I know. I know Kristy, she's on there. But yeah, I'm just really careful about who
Understandably.
I add as a friend. But my email, you can reach me at Nikki, that's Nikki, at crimeresearch.org.
Awesome.
We thank you so much for everything you're doing to help legislative policy, better decision making, and empowering women to get involved to help change legislation in their home states. It is something that we all have the ability to at least influence.
Yes.
Thank you so much today for sharing your powerful story with us, and we're glad that you were able to join us virtually. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you guys, and thank you for everything that you do.
We'll see you soon.
Have a good time in Montana.
Okay, take care.
Thank you for listening to the Wild and Uncut podcast. If you would like to hear more, be sure to subscribe to my Pursue the Wild digital series on YouTube and follow me at Kristy Titus on Facebook and Instagram.